now call this meeting to order. I'll ask the clerk to announce the meeting and call the roll.
Roll call. Roll call. Kane. Markley.
Here.
Walters. Philbrook.
Here.
Walker. Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Holland.
Here. I want to welcome tonight Reverend Dennis Wistrom from Sunset Hills Christian Church. For the invocation, I'd invite you to stand for the invocation and please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Almighty God, as we come to you tonight asking for wisdom, we thank you for each of our public officials who serve so diligently to take care of the needs of our town. We pray that you would bless them. We thank you for them. We also ask that we as citizens support those in leadership of our city. Bless us and guide us and help us to know the right decisions to make. For we ask you in your name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we get started tonight, I do want to recognize in the audience tonight Mary Ann Flunder, elected official on the Kansas City, Kansas Community College. Ms. Flunder, thank you for being with us. Also, Mary Gonzalez, the new chair of the Board of Public Utilities. Thank you for being here tonight. And we want to recognize former Mayor Joe Reardon, who's in the room tonight. Welcome to you. Ms. Cobbins, are there any revisions to tonight's agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, a blue sheet has been distributed. Under the mayor's agenda, we have 3 new items. Item number 2 is a communication regarding the administrator's evaluation. Item number 3, is a new item. It's a notification of the May 22nd special session, which will be held at 5:00 p.m. in the 5th floor conference room for CMIP Committee of the Whole. The final item is item number 4, which is a resolution changing the full commission meeting date of June 19th to June the 12th.
All right, thank you very much. The first item on tonight's agenda is a proclamation proclaiming May Mental Health Awareness Month. I will ask the clerk to read the proclamation as I come down to the podium.
The proclamation reads, whereas mental health is essential to every Wyandotte County citizen's overall health, and whereas all Wyandotte County adults and children experience times of difficulty or stress in their lives, and whereas with effective treatment, people with serious mental and behavioral health challenges can recover and lead fulfilling lives, and whereas Wyandotte Center is Wyandotte County's designated mental health center, and PACES is the behavioral health resource for the county's children, and whereas Wyandotte County's commitment to improving the mental and behavioral health of all its citizens is demonstrated through a host of collaborative programs and initiatives. And the strength of Wyandotte Center and PACES serves depending on establishing strong community partnerships, including those with the local school districts, Kansas City, Kansas Police, the Wyandotte County Sheriff, Kansas City, Kansas Housing Authority, the Unified Government Health Department, the Juvenile Intake and Assessment Center, Wyandotte County Court Services, and Community Corrections. And whereas the Unified Government of Wyandotte County and Kansas City, Kansas is committed to building on the energy displayed through these partnerships to help improve the mental and behavioral health of our community's children and adults, as well as build on the efforts to encourage candid discussion about mental health programs through Mental Health First Aid and Youth Mental Health First Aid. Now, therefore, I, Mark R. Holland, Mayor, CEO of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, to proclaim the month of May 2014 as Mental Health Awareness in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, and urge all citizens to promote good health, mental health, and their friends and family among the members.
It's my privilege this evening to present this to Mr. Randy Kallstrom, who is currently the Executive Director of the PACES program and the incoming CEO, President of Wyandotte, Inc. Welcome. Thank you. Give you this right here. There you go. Would you like to say a few words?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. Mental health is important to us all, and we appreciate all of the county's support for our folks who struggle with emotional distress and behavioral disorders. Thank you.
All right, as previously stated, 3 items have been added to the mayor's agenda. The first is a communication about the administrator's evaluation. The county administrator's performance evaluation is ready to be prepared. I have asked each of the commissioners if you would please submit as soon as possible items that you want to make sure are on that evaluation. We addressed many of these during the process of hiring, setting up the profile. The commission had input into establishing what group we would use to recruit our candidates and evaluate our candidates, and we're involved in the final interviews for those candidates. And I think in a lot of that conversation, each of the commissioners articulated different things that we wanted to see accomplished during the new administrator's tenure. And so I expect to do an annual evaluation that's called out for in the contract, and I want to prepare that document. So to that end, I would ask you to please submit those. I have it set up. Jason Banks in my office is going to be receiving those. If you can email those directly to him, we will then take that feedback, and I will meet with Mr. Bob Slavin, who conducted the search as part of his contract. Setting up the performance evaluation for the first year is included, and then I will bring the document back to this group to make sure it's the items that you would like to see. So I want your input. We'll do a draft, we'll get it back to you, and then once we approve the instrument, then we will use that as the basis for the administrator's first evaluation. But I want to make sure that's underway right away. All right. Item number 3 is a notification of the special session. I'll turn number 3 and 4 over to the clerk. Well, I'll give you I'll just not turn it over to the clerk. We're planning on a special session for May 22nd, 5th floor conference room for a CMIP committee of the whole in anticipation of the budget. That group has been working, and we need to get a report in front of the commission ahead of the July budget. And in addition to that, we're looking at changing the June 19th meeting to June 12th. We have some folks who are going to be out of town for June 19th. The risk of moving it is people were planning on being out the 12th. So what I wanted to do is check in with the commission and see what our attendance would look like for the 12th if we were able to move it to that. But we would take a resolution to vote on that. The announcement of the special session on the 22nd is set. We do need to discuss the 19th in terms of the 19th or the 12th. Mr. Walker? So the 12th, you're out. Is anyone else planning on being out the 12th? Walters? Okay, so Walker and Walters. Anyone else? We're looking. Who's out the 19th?
I think I am, but I gotta ask the boss at home because I don't know what my calendar is.
Kane, I think Kane put in for the 19th off.
I'm in town, but I'm just finished stuff.
So the 12th you would be unavailable. All right. The evidence is mounting against the 12th. The 19th, we have Kane out. Anyone else planning on being out the 19th? All right. We would have to vote to move it if we have 3 out on the 12th and only 1 out on the 19th. I'm inclined to leave it on the 19th. And what I would ask in terms of the agenda items, just ask the administrator to check those agendas and make sure there's a sufficient agenda to justify the meeting, or if our stuff can be pushed to the 15th and 26th. We have planning and zoning on June 26th, and we have a meeting on June 5th. So we'll ask the administrator to look into that. Otherwise, at this point, I'm thinking we're going to leave the meeting on the 19th unless we cancel it. Fair enough? All right, no need to vote on that. That concludes the mayor's agenda. The consent agenda. Does any member of the commission, staff, or citizen in attendance tonight wish to set aside any item on tonight's consent agenda? You need to step forward at this time and state your name and address for the record, and ask that item be set aside. If an item is not set aside, all items on the consent agenda will be voted on in a single vote. Any items to be set aside?
Mr. Mayor,
Commissioner Townsend?
thank you. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'd like to set aside item number 2, recommendation hike and bike trail. I just had a couple of quick questions about that.
All right, item number 2 is now set aside. Commissioner Markley?
Mayor, I'd like to set aside item number 7 to convey property to Loretto Properties.
Item number 7 will now be set aside. Any other items?
Move for approval for all remaining items?
Second.
Let the record show I see no one else moving to the microphone to remove an item. The motion is properly made and seconded. Roll call.
Roll call: Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia.
Aye.
Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
That brings us to item number 2, the recommendation on the hike and bike trail. I'll turn that over to Commissioner Townsend for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I had dealt with a matter of considerations that may have been given to safety and security issues as we look toward giving the public more access to the industrial area and the area and the levee, the public levee down in the Fairfax area. Some of you may recall when we had our tour that one of the things I showed in the Fairfax levee area were the Phillips 66, the storage tanks, and I am wanting to know what, if any, additional risk to public safety we may be taking on by opening these trails, particularly in that southern end of the levee there. It sounds like a good deal, but we don't want any disasters occurring in the north end because we'll have more traffic there than normal, and somebody decides to take inappropriate around the pumping stations or those tanks.
Mr. Roddy is here to answer those questions.
Yes, Commissioner. We met with Fairfax Drainage District, and obviously that was the one point that they were very concerned about. The trail that we selected was not on the berm, the ridge of the dike, but it was on the shelf that's out in front, closer to the river. They found this area to be more desirable from a safety point of view because there's a large boulder field that separates the shelf from the trail up on top of the dike. The proposal before you is a trial. It's going to operate for at least a year, and we will alter the operating rules as needed to make sure that the trail remains safe and secure for those that are down there. But we met with the Fairfax, and they expressed what they were willing to live with, and they found this trail to be acceptable.
Okay. Did that include, at this point in time, any likelihood of decreased physical security or barriers being added with the plan?
There will be a gate that can be locked, just as there's a gate today on our trail. The trail will be monitored on a daily basis by both Fairfax Drainage District and members of the Unified Government Park Department.
Okay. Will it be open for only a certain amount of hours in the day, like some of the parks or the Call Point facility?
Yes, it'll be only open during daylight hours.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to hear more, as I said, about that consideration. And I had talked to Mr. Schlittler, and so I know that the Fairfax Drainage District was involved, but I just wanted to make sure that I understood that that had been taken into account. Thank you.
Just as a follow-up note, by and large, many of the trails, when you open it up to the bikers and the hikers, you generally get the element of a community that you want to be your eyes and ears in this type of area. In the areas along the river, most people aren't there, so it's more prone to undesirables, creating vandal type of situation. So hopefully this will bring a better element to monitor the whole area. Thank you.
One more quick question. Is it anticipated that this will be paid for through, grants, or how are we looking at funding this?
This will be funded just out of our operations. The first segment of trail we're going to be operating on a trail that already exists, so the amount of expenditure to provide a trail surface is minimal. We will do it with our own staff.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, I'd like to address this as well. Is my mic on? I'd like to, test 2, 3. Is it on? But I'm not, are you getting anything back there? All right. It's not coming through the house. There it comes back on. There it just came back on. Commissioner Townsend, I have spoken extensively with the Drainage District and looked at hike and bike trails on levees across our nation. In Manhattan, Topeka, Lawrence, Parkville, Riverside, across the metropolitan area and across the state, the levees are used for hike and bike. I understand, I have heard the levee district talk about their levee is unique because of the industrial nature. I think those statements are completely overblown. The danger to those tanks comes from people in cars who could access those tanks from the road, which are fully accessible day and night, 24/7. The trails that are happening, the idea that people on bicycles or hiking would pose an additional danger, personally, I feel like is nonsense. People are hiking and biking on their trails across the country safely. There are some life safety issues related to the Fairfax that we will need to address. They have some pump stations and some other issues that would need to be fenced and protected, mostly for the life safety of the people on the trail, not because it would necessarily protect the equipment. But many of the property owners along that levee would like to see these trails open for their employees, for healthy living choices. But the biggest threat to this, to these places are the roads that are open 24/7 to any kind of traffic. And I agree with Mr. Roddy that having additional people hiking and biking on the trails would actually add additional eyes and ears to the trail and actually help make the area safer. So I believe that we will open these trails fully. I look forward to having every one of our levees fully open. I don't think it's fair that the Wyandotte County citizens are the only ones in the state who are not allowed to walk on their federally funded levees. And it is my intention to address the life safety concerns and to address the security concerns, but I believe we will open all of these levees in my tenure here, and we're going to press forward aggressively. I am pleased that we have this test site open so we can begin this journey, but until these levees are completely open to the public who paid for them with their federal dollars, I'm not going to be satisfied.
Well, I'm glad that we are talking about this, though, because, as you said, overblown. We don't want anything blown down in that area. And having taken a tour along that levee, people walking or on foot or on bikes will have a different level of access than people just whizzing by in cars down there. So as long as we are mindful of this and taking this into account, that's the best thing we can do at this point, because heaven forbid some type of catastrophe down there, it could be devastating, needless to say. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Is there a motion for this item? Move to approve? Or move the question? Okay, just make a motion to approve and it'll end the discussion. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Seeing no further comment, roll call.
Roll call. Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia. Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right, that brings us to item number 7, a resolution to convey property to Loretto Properties. That has moved through the Economic Development Standing Committee, was voted unanimously. Commissioner Markley, you wanted it pulled from the agenda. The floor is yours.
I'd just like to make a motion that we delay consideration of this until Thursday when we discuss our CMIP as a whole.
Second.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Thank you. I just want to say I think this is a tremendous project that brings a passionate new developer into our area and could potentially benefit not only my district, but really the city as a whole. However, since it does involve CMIP dollars as part of the overall project, I do support moving this to our discussion CMIP Committee of the Whole next week.
Commissioner Walker.
I would like to be a little better informed on what this project involves if we're moving these dollars. As Commissioner Markley said in the earlier session, we've had Oak Grove Road on CMIP being pushed back every year since she was in junior high school. So if we're going to advance this, I'm all for it if it's a good project, but all I've got is a guy buys a building and we're going to move this forward. So I think I ought to get a little bit more information about why we're doing this. So if we can do that, then we'll be ready to move it forward. I'm sure it's a good project. I just don't see what the rush is on this.
I think I'd like to give the developer an opportunity to present if we want more information to see what the impact of pushing this would be. But I think we can begin that education process because in some respects, this is the CMIP conversation is a special session next week, and we're not set up to vote in a CMIP dialogue for that. But I would like to hear from the developer and also from our administrator in terms of economic development projects that push these kind of projects. This is not unusual that we would have a economic development project, speaking of being strategic, that would push a CMIP project ahead of schedule. So I'm going to ask the developer if they'd like to come forward and offer any comments to give us an idea of the program.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, County Administrator. It's good to be with you here this evening. We have prepared a brief presentation.
Can you please state your name
Yeah, my
and
name is
address for
Joe
the record?
Reardon, and my address, I work for the McEnany Law Firm, and my address is 4812 North 124th Terrace in Kansas City, Kansas. Glad to be here this evening with you. Along with me tonight is Randy Huber from A.L. Huber. He's in the back of the room. He's the general contractor on the project. And then we also have the architect, lead architect on this, Jim Pettyjohn, who's with us. James Arkell was unable to be here. He intended to be here, but he actually had a family matter that he had to attend to at the last minute and asked me to come and make presentation. I do have a brief slideshow that I can walk through, and Commissioner Walker, hopefully we can answer some of the questions you have. We're glad to make this presentation tonight. We're very excited. Loretto Properties is a company that was founded by Lamar Hunt Jr. and James Arkell, and it's a residential and commercial development company that's mission-based. They're working really to make investments, targeted strategic investments, to try to better communities. Most of their work to date has been done in residential real estate, not all of it, but most of it, $3 million in total. None of that is here in Kansas City, Kansas yet on the Loretto property side of things. And as I said, they've mostly been involved in affordable housing efforts in the metro area. I want to tell you a little bit about how this company comes to Kansas City, Kansas, because I think it's a story merited some discussion. Many of you know that at 9th and Bouquet, there's now a new building, the Little Sisters of the Lamb, which is a religious order based in France, found its way by way of invitation by a priest that was studying there to Kansas City, Kansas as part of its mission, and had basically been renting two homes in this area, one of them that Loretto Properties helped facilitate the rental payments on, And ultimately, Loretto became a participant in the fundraising and the development of their new monastery at 9th and Bow Key. I know many of you have probably been there. It makes a significant difference in that community in an area that really had not seen any investment in a long time. So that really brought this company to Kansas City, Kansas. And they began to look around in our community to see what other opportunities they might be. And they came to 7th in Minnesota, which all of you are familiar with. It's just outside the door, and saw what we were able to do, you were able to do, with the Tiger Funds at 7th in Minnesota and the new transit center, and really starting to bring to life the downtown master plan and what the downtown visions to be looked like. And as they looked at that corridor, they went down the 700 block of Minnesota Avenue and came to the Katz Building, which I know all of you are familiar with, one of the most historically significant remaining buildings on that particular block of Minnesota Avenue. I put up here a picture that Randy actually took of the outside of the building right before they began demolition work inside, and also a postcard. There are many postcards, but this was one that I thought depicted maybe the Katz Building at its heyday, and you can't see the Katz sign that used to sit outside of it. It was pretty spectacular in and of itself. But James Arkell and Lamar Hunt Jr. pursued purchasing this property and did in fact purchase the property on March 4th of this year. As a result of that purchase, the Katz Building is not tax delinquent for the first time in decades. It's paid its taxes fully. I think there was a delinquency in excess of $80,000 at the time that they purchased the building. That's been paid in full. So it's back on the tax rolls. Randy and A.L. Huber have gone through the building. They have a demolition permit already in place, and have been demolishing the inside of the building, which was in pretty rough condition, quite frankly, and have now arrived at an estimate of $900 million, or 900, I wish it was 900 million, perhaps later, of $900,000 into this building to fully rehab the building, to have a mix of retail and office tenants. There is a tenant on the first floor that will occupy the front part of it and bring a coffee shop there, so it'll bring back to life the retail aspect of the Katz Building in even its original iteration. And they are actively talking to office tenants for the remainder of the building. It's about 15,000 square feet, about 5,000 square feet on each floor. And they're going through now and doing demo. They will move after that to get their construction permit and move forward on this rehabilitation. As they looked at that Katz Building, I think I've covered all of this. Let me mention this because I know that's an important aspect of what they're after. The exterior of the building, what they're shooting for, perhaps won't look identical, if I could go back, to what it looked like in this postcard, but they certainly want to restore the outside of the building, the facade, to the extent that they can, and with modern materials, but to make it really complement, I think, the streetscape that already exists at 7th in Minnesota. And their intention, quite frankly, in moving forward the Katz Building in this way is for it to act as a showcase for what can be done on Minnesota. I think they're very excited to see what the Chamber's been able to do, and quite frankly, they formed a very strong partnership with Wyandotte Economic Development as a result of this. And they believe that part of what needs to happen on Minnesota as they pursue not just this investment, but more, is to really let people see what the potential truly is. And so this acts as a model showcase, the Katz Building itself, to bring that into reality. To the left of that is I almost put on this, I think that County Administrator Bach mentioned at our standing committee that this is now the old EPA building, but we can at least say it's the old EPA building or part of the EPA complex. This building is currently owned by the unified government. Loretto Properties wishes to purchase this building and also rehab this building, bringing it back to life. There's about 30,000 square feet inside of this building, about 15,000 on each level. The building's owned by the unified government. It's tax exempt as it sits here today. Loretto entered into a negotiation with your economic development staff and legal department to negotiate a purchase agreement, which you have in your packet tonight. And as part of that purchase agreement have made several commitments. One, that they would spend a minimum amount of dollars on rehab on Minnesota Avenue. Two, that they would do that in a deadline fashion. Their intention is to be done, and in fact they say this in the contract with you, that they would complete the Katz Building by the first quarter of next year. and that they would complete rehab of this building within 24 months of executing an agreement to purchase with you as well. As part of that agreement, it's the firm belief of both Lamar and James that to make this showcase work, moving forward for two reasons, moving forward the streetscape rehabilitation becomes important. One, as they talk to potential tenants, and they've talked to a lot of them, there's a lot of interest, quite frankly, out there to occupy these buildings. There are always questions. Okay, the streetscape stops in the middle of the street. Is it going to come forward to the front door of our facility, and we'd like to have that? Those conversations have been going on actively. Secondly, from the terms of doing the rehabilitation outside, from a timing standpoint, to be able to open these buildings in a phased way that syncs with the rehabilitation. As you all know, this is a rehabilitation project. There's going to be a lot of demo that has to occur, but to sync that with access to the buildings, number one, makes it a showcase at the right time when they're actively trying to get people to walk in the door. But secondly, it makes sense from a construction timing standpoint, and Randy can certainly speak to that if you have questions about it. But that was their request to the unified government, was to work with them to move that forward, to time that with their schedule in doing the rehabilitation of both of these buildings. So on the old EPA building, Randy's had an opportunity to go through that building, but not extensively, as you might imagine. And right now, roughly estimates, Huber estimates that rehab would be somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000. We feel confident in giving that range of numbers tonight, depending on who the tenants ultimately be. That may go up, we don't know, but we think that that's a reasonable estimate to give you on that building. So $900,000 on the Katz building. I think there's a bit more certainty as to cost because they're farther along in that. Between $400,000 and $600,000 in rehabilitation of the old EPA building. And again, as I mentioned, in the contract that you have in your packet tonight, there's a commitment to complete this rehabilitation within 24 months of the purchase. As I mentioned, Jim Pettyjohn's the project architect. He is here with me in the back of the room tonight. And Randy Huber with A.L. Huber is the general contractor on the project and is also here and would be certainly available, Mayor and Commissioners, to answer any questions you may have about the project that we're very excited, quite frankly, to move forward with in Kansas City, Kansas. And I think that Commissioner McKiernan mentioned this, but I know that both James and Lamar wanted me to mention this tonight too. They believe that this is the beginning of a long-term partnership. Their commitment is not just the Katz building and the UG building, hopefully the UG building, but it really is to form a partnership, and in partnership where they become participants in not just downtown, but in other parts of Kansas City, Kansas too. They see the potential, they believe in the potential, they're very excited about getting started here, but continuing that relationship going forward. And we're pleased to present that to you here this evening, and we certainly are available to answer any questions, Mayor.
Thank you. I would ask Administrator Bach to talk to us about this project in the context of economic development and infrastructure costs that we incur in other locations.
Thank you, Mayor. In the world of projects that we work with from an economic development perspective, or just overall projects that the government works with on an annual basis, first I'd say annually we move projects within our CMIP plan every year. I mean, some of those are ones that we come forward with from a staff perspective when we look at things that become a higher priority through a given year, or it's something that commissioners or several commissioners have come together with and said that this now has become a higher priority in our community. In terms of looking at this we often look at projects on a development basis and say, how does this come into play to leverage private dollars? That's usually one of the things we'll look at. We'll say, okay, if there's a way for this project to step forward and actually make an investment from private dollars to come back into the government, then it'll move up. And this comes sometimes in terms of grant funding type projects too that'll come forward. Oftentimes you'll see us move forward with something that KDOT or the federal government has laid forth to say, okay, if we put our money in today or next year, then they will advance funding on it. So we'll move up, because if we put $1 million into something, we get another $1 million put in now, versus if we wait 3 or 4 years, that'll hold us out. Evaluated this project similar to that in working with them to say, okay, if we put money into this now, and there are a whole lot of different factors you can look at in a project like this. One is currently this building sets as a liability to us. I mean, it has value. I can say it has value. However, we've sat in ownership of it since the EPA moved out of it and moved over to their former headquarters down the street, you know, since the late 90s. So with that in play, we've had to go over there and do roof repairs and such like that, usually on an annual basis to keep this going. So it kind of falls into our facilities area to keep this building going. And if we can either do that or we can just totally neglect it, and then it would come down. So having an active private sector partner come in with the statement that they're ready to invest dollars in it, take the building, buy the building from us, was an immediate positive impact to us to look at and say, okay, this is really good for us because now we're putting this back on the tax rolls and back in place so we no longer have to spend money on it. Then their willingness to step forward and say, and I'll say this, we've been talking to them for a while, so I mean some of the things that they proactively move forward with, I will say that's just good faith on their part to say we're going to move into the Katz building. They paid all the back taxes. I believe it was $86,000 on that project that they moved forward with and paid for. So they've already made a significant investment in our downtown. But then their next steps to say, okay, we will spend $1 to $1.5 million, which Mr. Reardon has outlined tonight. Sounds like it hits that $1.5 million mark in that area. If we invest a similar number in our downtown streetscape, and of course the number that I laid forth the standing committee and that we built in our CMIP plan of 1.4 million is really, I would say, a high number. We have the flexibility that our contract only requires us to do streetscape as it moves in front of this building, so that it gives us flexibility if we go through the CMIP plan and say, well, we don't want to go all the way through the intersection. We could ratchet it back a little bit from a cost perspective and still get the project done. Initially, I didn't want to put that forth to the commission because logically that's not a good plan from an infrastructure standpoint. It would be better to go ahead and do it all the way through the intersection. And I think with a private sector partner who really seems to be active, not only looking here, but may have further interest, that we want to jump up at this time and really make this project happen. So that's where it came from the economic development side on this, Mayor.
Commissioner McKiernan.
And I do want to point out that when we did the Tiger grant that got the transit center at 7th and Minnesota, that grant only paid for enough infrastructure to go to the 7.5 mark on the block, not all the way to 8th Street. So this rest of this streetscape actually was on last year's CMIP, and it got moved back because it was one of those that didn't leverage additional dollars at that time. But I think now things have changed, but I will say I still support we move this to the CMIP discussion and then bring this project back for vote after that discussion.
Okay, Commissioner Markley.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do want to be clear. It sounds like a very good project. I appreciate the leveraging of funds. And if this happened maybe in the middle of the year, I probably would have said, okay, let's just see what happens. But we are right in getting ready to talk about CMIP, and what we know from our budget is that if we're going to pay for this, we're going to not pay for something else. And I just think it's probably important for us to know what we're not going to pay for if we're going to pay for this. So that's why I would like to see it come as part of that CMIP discussion as a whole.
Commissioner Walker.
I would say, Mr. Reardon, with the information, I'm much more relieved at what the future intent is with those buildings and what I came in here with. And I could not glean that from the agenda materials. So I thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Glad to do it.
Look forward to moving this on down the road, assuming somebody doesn't get gored too bad on CMIP.
Is there I'm anticipating then I would put this on the agenda for next week. For the meeting on the 22nd, though, is only a special session. We do not have a regularly called meeting. We would need to have a regularly called meeting if we're going to vote on it on the 22nd. Otherwise, the next meeting that we could actually vote on it would be on June 5th. So we would be, even if we
Mr. Mayor, we have a P&Z meeting on May 29th.
have a P&Z meeting on the 29th, okay. So would there be detriment to this project waiting on the 29th for a vote?
I can't speak directly for my client, but we did talk a little bit about timing, and I think that in that kind of range, it's something that's realistic for them as well.
Okay. All right, then I will anticipate putting this on the agenda for the 29th. We will, in terms of this, and now you have to ask a procedural question. Are we returning this back to the standing committee, or are we simply tabling it until the 26th? Ms. Boding?
I did not hear any wish from the commission to take it back to the standing committee, so I think it can go forward.
So we can simply table it until the 26th? Is that
Yes.
right? Does that require a motion because it's on the agenda? A motion to table to the 26th, is that required? I'm sorry, the 29th, thank you.
Before we do that, Mayor, may I speak?
Yes, please do, Mr. Walker.
You know, this rule about not taking votes at special sessions, we also have a rule that says we can vote to suspend any rule for a given meeting. I don't see why we don't vote to suspend the rule on the 22nd after we either thumbs up or thumbs down based on what the CMIP report shows, and not delay whatever they're needing to do any further, depending on what we hear.
The only requirement we do have requirements, and I think from a process perspective, I hear what you're saying, Commissioner. I think from a process perspective, having items on the agenda so any interested citizen can come and be made aware that that's going to be on the agenda, publishing the agenda in advance, I think is cleaner and more transparent in terms of letting people know these are the items we're going to be discussing, so that people have a chance to read this online if they'd like to, or come in and get a copy of it, and so they can be fully informed. I think it's more about the information to the public than it is whether or not we could handle a vote on the 22nd. I think we could. I think it's better policy if we put it on the 29th so that we can notice the public properly and give them an opportunity to weigh in should they choose to do that. So if it's not any different, I would rather just wait till the 29th and move it forward at that time. All right, is there a motion to table this to the 29th of May, 2014?
I make my motion to specify that we will table it until the 29th of May.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Seeing no further comments, roll call.
Roll call, Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia. Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. That brings us now to our public hearing. Item number 1 is a public resolution, bonds for the J.E. Dunn project. Turn this over to Administrator Bach to establish.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a great project moving into our area. I'm going to just turn this over to our Economic Development Director, George Brakovich, to talk about the project, and then move, if any questions, we can open up for the public hearing.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bach, Mayor, Commissioners. Pleasure to be here before you tonight. George Brakovich with Economic Development. Fantastic project for the state of Kansas that I'll give you a few details on in a little bit, and just thrilled that J.E. Dunn selected a site within Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, to consolidate their 3 separate logistical divisions here within our community. A quick slide for what are we here for tonight. Really 2 items. One is to open and conduct a public hearing to consider the tax abatement pilot for this project, and then ultimately, if you see fit, adopt a resolution of intent to issue the $10 million in IRBs, and that pilot schedule is embedded in that resolution. Really quickly, to orient you to the site, it's the physical address is 240 South 65th Street. So this is the Turner Diagonal, and you move west along K32. There's actually a stoplight here at South 65th Street. It is a 22-acre vacant piece of ground right now. The proposal is to construct a 60,000 square foot industrial building and use the remainder of the property as a storage yard for construction equipment. Again, the $10 million in IRBs represents the acquisition costs and construction costs to get the site ready, but overall, it should be noted that this is about a $45 to $50 million total investment when you value in the value of that construction equipment. The abatement itself, per our policy, the base abatement starts at 45%. The components that we had negotiations with J.E. Dunn and they chose to make a commitment to, again, the capital investment of $45 million earns them an additional 10%, and the local minority and women-owned business enterprises having participation rates in the construction of the project, they actually selected the more aggressive. We have a two-tiered system, and these are the higher goals, earns them another 10%. So what they would qualify for per the tax abatement policy is a 65% abatement. The pilot then itself, again, per our policy, based on the level of investment, they qualify for a 10-year term on the pilot. I wanted to know why we think this is a good financial investment for our community is the current property taxes total for the 22 acres is about $1,600 a year. Year one of the pilot, even with the 65% abatement, you move that payment to $96,400 and some change. The pilot itself then has a 2% annual escalator embedded in that, so by the time the pilot's expiring, the payment's over $115,000 a year. Wanted to note as well, these are IRBs. They don't require the UG's backing, and in addition to that, we do have a cost of issuance fees for bonds, and for this particular project, that is another one-time gain for the UG in the amount of $36,000. And again, leaving you with this slide, I know there's a few folks here. I failed to mention Greg Kendall was with Wyandotte Economic Development Council, was very instrumental at the beginning process of attracting these folks to our community. And then I know that Kurt Peterson with Polsinelli is here representing the developer, and Patrick Lease is here with J.E. Dunn, should you have some questions about their project. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing for consideration. Anyone in attendance tonight wish to speak on this item? If so, please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. You'll be given up to 3 minutes to state your views. I'll begin by asking if anyone is in favor of this project, if they would like to step forward and speak at this time. Let the record show no one is moving forward at this time. Would anyone like to speak in opposition to this project? Please come forward. Let the record show there is no one stepping forward. I will now close the public hearing, and the motion and second are properly before us. Roll call.
Roll call. Kane. Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Philbrook.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Mugia. Maddox.
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
Thank you. This brings us to our administrator's agenda. It's an ordinance for the utility system improvements and refunding bonds. I'll turn this over to Administrator Bach.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a really good news in relation to this project as it's set out before us tonight. This is an original project that was the commission had moved forward to approve up to $250 million toward the Board of Public Utilities project. The first phase of the financing for $110 million went forth before the standing committee earlier this month. Did receive unanimous approvals, which would typically put this on consent agenda. However, as we go through it, we have to set the parameters resolutions that are around that item and get this in place to give the finance team the ability to go forward and issue the actual money for this in June. However, as they were going through and analyzing this, our credit to our finance team, Board of Public Utilities staff, and our bond counsel, as they sought through this, they found an opportunity to refinance some existing bonds that were out there for the Board of Public Utilities, which is an amount of $105 million, which will constitute a savings over the term of this from the original agreement of $9 million. So we wanted to go ahead and get that on the agenda. We thought that was it's a great opportunity to jump in with one project and save another $9 million on another project. So we do have members of the Board of Public Utilities here, their staff, finance team that can answer any questions. However, I would recommend that you move forward for approval with this.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further comment? Seeing none, roll call.
Roll call. Kane.
Aye.
Markley.
Aye.
Walters. Walters? Philbrook?
Aye.
Walker?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Mugia? Maddox?
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right, we will now recess from this meeting. Normally, we adjourn from this meeting and go into Land Bank Board of Trustees, but because we have an executive session at the end, we're only going to recess now as Board of Commissioners. But it's not going to be much of a recess because during recess, we're going to convene as the Board of Land Bank Trustees. So we do have some items. Are there any revisions, Ms. Cobbins, to the Land Bank agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, under item number 1 on the consent agenda for the Land Bank, it has been requested that item for property at 423 Greeley Avenue be removed from the agenda tonight.
All right, item number 1 has been removed. That leaves us the remaining consent calendar before us.
Move for approval for all
Second.
remaining items.
Second.
Actually, I spoke too quickly. Is there anyone in attendance tonight who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Let the record show no one is moving forward to remove. Therefore, the motion and second are properly before us. Roll call.
Roll call. Kane?
Aye.
Markley? Walters? Philbrook?
Aye.
Walker?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Mugia? Maddox?
Aye.
The vote is 9-0. That motion carries.
All right, we are now adjourned as the Board of Trustees, and we're back in session as the Board of Commissioners. We do have a public announcement. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bach to give us a report on today's tax sale.
Thank you, Mayor. We did have a tax sale earlier today. I will say our number was down a little bit from where we've been in previous tax sales, though it was still a good tax sale. Our total from the total from the tax sale was about $586,000, but we had an amount around 1.8 million in redemptions that it came in that are partial the people coming in redeeming property or getting on payment plans. So our total was a little over $2.4 million. One of the reasons we were down a little bit is because we only have a couple of abstractors. Unfortunately, we had some issues where they had to be gone some time periods during this, and that does have an impact on our ability to do this, and that's one of these issues I'm contemplating during the upcoming budget process, how we might consider that, because it's pretty easy to lose $500,000 by dropping down in staff for a short period of time. But all in all, we're very happy with the kind of sales and the activity that went on today.
Thank you. Commissioner Murguia.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to say, fantastic job. As you all know, the tax delinquency rate in Wyandotte County is a big issue for me. It creates a burden on those of us that are paying our taxes. And so I appreciate staff's hard work. I know all too familiar with the process that it takes to get a tax sale in order. And I think our administrator and his staff have done a phenomenal job. And that's fantastic work.
All right. I will now entertain a motion to enter into executive session for litigation for 30 minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call.
I'm sorry. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Anyone who wants a roll call, say aye. We are recessed to executive session on the 9th floor for 30 minutes.
Aye.